All right, good morning, grade 7 and 8s. We are going to have two lessons today, two videos for multiplying decimals. And now we are getting into a bit of the nitty-gritty. So as we covered previously, we talked about multiplying and dividing by powers of 10, being 10, 100, and 1000. We also started talking about multiplying decimals by a whole number. And so if you need to, please check out those three videos from yesterday on the channel. But today we're going to be going over page 80, 81, 82 in your booklet. And we're going to start by multiplying decimals by 0 0.1, 0 0.01, and 0 0.001. There are two ways to go about it. First, they want to remind you that, by multiplying by 10, 100, or 1000, we're moving the decimal point. So 10 times 10, I'm moving this decimal and it's invisible because there's, a bunch of zeros this way. I'm moving the decimal to the right. So 10 times 10, I've moved the decimal, the invisible decimal, over here, and now I have 100. We also talked about counting the zeros. If I have 10 times 100, I see boom, boom, boom. I don't see any changes with the ones. 1 times 1 is 1. So I'm going to have 1 and then 3 zeros. Again, count with your calculator or do this with your calculator if you don't believe me. So now we are doing, for question 1 and question 2, talking about moving the decimal when we already have a decimal value. So the first one says 0 times 1/10. Well, I'm going to move the decimal to the right. This is a bit of review. All right, so 10 times 1/10 equals 1 whole. If I do the same with 5 times 1/10, well, in this case, I'm doing the opposite. Now I'm looking at this 5, which is a whole, and I'm going to move the decimal that way. Instead of going bigger, like we talked about in video 1 and video 2, if I'm multiplying by a decimal, that number is going to get a smaller value. And I'm going to end up with 5/10. All right, so just moving on, this is pretty straightforward. If I have two zeros, or 0.01 100th, and that would be, let's do times 0.1, I'll take this one and I'll go, ooh, I need to move all of this, the decimal, here. And I'm going to get 1,000th. 0.001. This is a bit of a tricky concept if we're looking at it with decimals. However, one thing that I've been doing consistently for you is I'm not just saying decimal number, I'm saying 0 decimal number. The counting the 0 rule applies for decimals as well, but in the opposite sense. I will always have a 0 before the decimal, and then I'm going to put a digit here. Now, what do I have? 1/10. Well, let's say that I take these numbers and I reverse them. It kind of looks like a 10. I call this a 10th. That is a 10. How many zeros in a 10th? 1 0. How many zeros in a 10? 1 0. And it looks like I'm making a weird smiley face right now. So if I take 1/10 and I multiply it by another 1/10, how many zeros do I have? 2. Well, if I have to have a decimal, but I have two zeros, 1/10 times 1/10 equals 100th. So the 0 counting still applies, but again in the opposite. I will have a 0 before the decimal, and then I will have zeros after the decimal to equal the total amount of zeros in the initial question. Another way to do this in terms of multiplying by decimals and dividing by decimals, and this is my big secret, and I'm going to get into this more for the second part of the video, but you've heard me say it over and over again. I've been using the accurate math terms. I call this 1/10. You are pretty good at representing fractions and decimals in various ways. How else can we represent 1/10? That looks like 1/10. And if we remember our multiplying fractions rules, whenever I am multiplying fractions, so if I have 1/10 times 1/10, the numerators multiply by the numerators, the denominators multiply by the denominators. So 10 times 10 equals 100. So 1/10 times 1/10 equals 100, which is exactly what we showed here. So if it means converting to a fraction to solve and then reconverting back into a decimal, that's how I tend to do it, if we're being honest with each other. So again, we are dealing with the concept of shifting the decimal to a different place depending on the decimal given. And that's how we're going to go about page 80. Now I'm going to go over page 80 with you guys either today or tomorrow, and I'm going to see what you guys have. So please make sure that you watch this before your meeting, and please make sure that you are attending meetings if you are having any questions. And if you're not having questions, I'm almost worried that you should be doubly attending meetings, because this is some of the hardest stuff we've got left for the rest of the year. Lastly, we are going to be doing just straight up multiplying decimals by decimals. So this is a concept that, once again, is rather tricky to wrap your head around, but I want to remind you about what multiplying is. So, it looks as though I'm going to do this in another video, so I'm going to wrap it up here. But that was just multiplying decimals by 0.1 or 1/10, 100th, and 1,000th. And we're going to continue with the last 2 pages of our booklet in the next video. See you soon.